tired of ads crashing your comedy podcast party? Good news. Ad-free listening on Amazon Music is included with your Prime membership. Just head to amazon.com/ad-free comedy to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads. Enjoy thousands of Acast shows ad-free for Prime subscribers. Some shows may have ads.
At Discount Tire, we know your time is valuable. Get 30% shorter average wait time when you buy and book online. Did you know Discount Tire now sells wiper blades? Check out our current deals at discounttire.com or stop in and talk to an associate today. Discount Tire.
Let's get you taken care of.
Salah. Escape Cancelo. Oh, it's brilliant from Mo Salah. And still, Salah. Oh, sensational! Son had a go and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne! And it is Ward-Prowse.
Martinelli, gorgeous!
Still Gallagher! Oh, he's done it again! And City have won the Premier League!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, EPL Index proudly brings to you the best prediction podcast in the world, A Tad Predictable, with your host, Tadiwa Chanakira, and his guest, Aston Villa's own, James Billingham.
It's game week 22, and you know what that means. It's time for another brand new episode of A Tad Predictable. I know there's FA Cup games coming up this weekend, but straight after that, during next week, from Tuesday the 30th of Jan, Premier League is back. So there's no rest for these guys. They had a mini break, if you can call it that, for some teams, but certainly not something that was equal to what Harry Kane got to enjoy this time around with the winter breaks that they have in other leagues. I am happy to welcome back James. James, welcome back to the show. Obviously, Aston Villa fan. We enjoyed having you on. It's always good when someone comes on and then we're able to sign them on a long-term deal. And I know at these points in time in the transfer window, sometimes loan signings don't work out quite well, but you seem to have settled in quite nicely.
Yeah, it's a tough market to manoeuvre usually in January. So yeah, I feel like I've settled down already, and I'm enjoying being back on.
Excellent stuff, and I'm sure the listeners are glad to have you back on as well. I did mention there, obviously, there's FA Cup coming up this coming weekend, but then the Premier League kicks back up in the middle of the week next week. Later on in this podcast, we're going to go a bit deeper into sort of the cups, because first and foremost, England have two cups for their top division in terms of the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup, where some of the leagues have only one cup. We'll discuss how we value them, maybe take a viewpoint from fans from different levels of the Premier League, how they might value them, and then have a nice discussion on that. But before we get to that juicy discussion, we've got a couple of fixtures to run through. They're mostly all going to be the ones that are on Tuesday, the 30th of Jan. Two of which are on TNT Sport. And then the rest, if you're in the UK, I guess it's good luck to you if you want to watch Fulham versus Everton, Luton versus Brighton, or Crystal Palace versus Sheffield United. You're kind of out of luck unless you link up with our presenting sponsors. This podcast is brought to you by Liberty Shield in association with EPLindex.com. Liberty Shield is a VPN service. It's really easy to install, really easy to use, and has a whole host of features. You guys can use it on multiple devices, whether you're traveling and you don't want to get locked out of your bank account, or you want to be safe whilst you're using public Wi-Fi, which is a big thing. If you want to unlock geo-locked content or just want to protect your online data, then Liberty Shield is definitely for you. One of my favorite things from Liberty Shield is just being able to unlock content from around the world. I guess our listeners would mostly associated with Premier League games where they can access a Peacock or a DSTV in South Africa that shows all of these games. And it's not an issue for you, but it also works for stuff like Disney or Netflix. You can unlock some of the Marvel films that only are tailored for, in terms of geographical locking on Netflix, that are tailored for the US market and stuff like that. Guys, definitely go and check out Liberty Shield. If you use the coupon code EPL25, you'll get 25% off on your either the router or the software VPN. James, let's start off with Nottingham Forest versus Arsenal. Obviously, Arsenal were the first game this past weekend as well. A skeleton schedule this past weekend with them having quite a rampant display against Crystal Palace. I guess from Nottingham Forest's perspective, it was quite heartbreaking for them. I thought, that the game against Brentford, I thought it was going to be a lot more cagey than it ended up being. It ended up being quite an open game and quite a fun game in my opinion. They're looking good under Nuno, in my opinion. Obviously, there's a lot of players that are missing for them from AFCON and stuff like that. So I thought that was going to hinder them quite a bit in the weeks whilst AFCON is on. But somehow they've still managed to give, good competitive performances. What do you make of Nottingham Forest and then obviously Arsenal and this fixture?
I agree. I think Forest are looking pretty decent under Nuno, and I think that as time goes on, they'll just get better, and then it'll be interesting to see, obviously, come the summer, what their recruitment will be around their difficulties and stuff at the moment. But I think the squad's kind of settling pretty well without the players that they are missing, obviously. And I think that game against Brentford was, I think it had a bit of an energy around it just because of the Tony return. So there was a bit more to it. I think Brentford fed off that in the end, and I mean, the game was won by a really, really good goal. I mean, there's two brilliant goals in that game in general. So, yeah, I thought they were quite unlucky. So I think they'll be licking their wounds and they'll be going into this game against Arsenal, obviously at home, hoping that they can punish any spaces that Arsenal do leave. But Arsenal played well at the weekend, and I think they sort of clicked and got a bit of frustration out of the system. And I think set pieces are going to be really big for them for the rest of the season. They have been already. I mean, they look really good at set pieces, especially corners. So that's going to be something that teams are going to have to try and stop Arsenal from benefiting from. I think, I'd imagine that Arsenal will win, but I don't think it's going to be that easy. I think that they'll win 2-1. It will be a tight game at times, but I think Arsenal's quality will shine through in the end.
Yeah, and you've mentioned the set pieces there. I think especially for a side that's been criticised of their lack of firepower in front of goal, having that sort of extra arrow, so to speak, in your quiver in Arsenal, being able to get goal from set pieces, it just relieves a little bit of pressure as well. Because I think we saw them start to play their game and become more confident after they've gone ahead. You've got the two set piece goals. The pressure's now off to score the goals. Maybe the players aren't focused too much or sometimes you get in your own head when you're struggling to score goals and it ends up just compounding the situation. But it seemed to help them out. So if they can continue doing that, chipping in with a couple of set piece goals every now and then, it certainly will help them out. From my perspective, I like how competitive Nottingham Forest have been in games. Obviously, at home, under Steve Cooper, they were really good. I'm seeing it's going to be the same thing with Nuno. Get those results at home. I can see them getting a 2-2 draw in this one. And part of that is obviously Arsenal. Yes, their set pieces are really good, one of the best in the league, but it's not often that you score set pieces every single week. Maybe every odd week or so. So again, and if they don't then get those set piece goals, are they going to have the confidence to score goals outside of those set pieces? I think that will allow Nottingham Forest a chance just to stay in this game. And with the home crowd, I can see them, whether they're 2-1 down or something, getting roared back into the game and getting a late equalizer for a 2-2 draw on that one. Let's move on to Fulham versus Everton. Obviously, Fulham were announced a tad predictable team to root for this season. They've had a bit of a rough spell. Obviously, 4 losses in their last 5 games, but I don't know how much of that is focusing on the FA Cups and the Carabao Cups. Obviously, they're deep in the Carabao Cup. They've got a game coming up soon against Liverpool that they'll need to focus on as well. I think that has had an impact on them. The focus has been turned a little bit. Obviously, in the league, they've been doing well enough where it wasn't really now a problem in terms of are they going to get sucked into that relegation zone. Yes, they're on 24 points. 16 points currently is where Luton is. You kind of have half an eye on it, but I think with the way they've played so far this season, they were comfortable enough that, okay, we've got a bit of breathing room. Let's really push on these cup games. And I think that's affected their league form. And obviously, if you want to come right game, you need to take certainly your points at home, but also coming up against an Everton side who have been struggling. They had that resurgence, obviously when the points got deducted. It's kind of weaned a little bit, and then they've been hit with potentially another points deduction. So I don't know if that's going to rejuvenate them again. But for me, I think the biggest concern when it comes to Everton is DCL. Calvert-Lewin does not look like the same player at the moment. He can't seem to buy a goal. And if he's not scoring goals, I'm starting to worry about Everton and their future in the Premier League.
Yeah, I think on Fulham, I think on their day, they can turn up and they can be very, very competitive. I'm still quite a big fan of Tom Kearney, considering Villa's past of him beating us in the playoff final. But he's such an intelligent player. Really like Jimenez. I think him coming back into some sort of form is really good to see. But yeah, I think the cup competitions are taking a bit of a toll on the league form at times. And I do think, obviously, they play the second leg before they play Everton this coming game week. So be interesting to see. I'd imagine they will prioritise that because, with the position they're in and that they're very close to pulling something off there. So I imagine that they'll put everything into that. But as you say, Everton, I think they're very organised and they are quite creative in their own way. And the only problem that they're having at the moment really is that they don't look clinical. They've got a couple of goal scorers in that squad, but I think, that when you're in that sort of position, all those goals that mean so much, I think that plays a big part. I mean, we obviously played them in last time out, and Calvert-Lewin going through one-on-one against Martinez, and I just didn't feel, if I was in their boots, I wouldn't feel comfortable Calvert-Lewin was going to score that still. I didn't feel that worried considering the size of the chance that it was. And obviously Decore had that disallowed goal at the end. He's a big source of goals if they can get him with the late runs into the box or around that area anyway. They just need to start, not simple, but start taking their chances and they will get more results because they are a good side and their organisation's their biggest quality, I think, because that can soak up more pressure than most other teams, I think, and then be able to pounce. But that's the thing, that you have to be clinical. There's a lot of talk around XG and everything these days, but you can't account for quality in that. So players take chances if they're really, really good players. So I think this game will be quite cagey at times, and I think it'll be a 1-1 draw. And I think Fulham would take that, and I think Everton would want a lot more. Right now, considering Fulham have got that midweek tie, I think they'd probably take a point if they can pull off a win against Liverpool.
Yeah, that would be a fun week for them if they can get that. And I'm sure if they could pick between the two games which one to win, I would assume most of the fans would want the Liverpool one to be the one that they win. I've gone with a 1-0 Fulham win. Again, obviously, all the things we've spoken about with regards to Everton's firepower, I'm waiting for them to prove it to me in that sense. And with Decore, it's one of those where he's not known as a regular goal scorer. So is it more a purple patch that he went through? And if that's the case, then you start to worry even more. But if he can continue to score goals, that would be good for them. I'm going to ask you to lead us off with Luton versus Brighton. Obviously, Luton currently find themselves in 18th place with a game in hand over Everton, who have 17 points. And then obviously Nottingham Forest have 20. So even if they win their game in hand, they wouldn't catch up to Nottingham Forest. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Luton versus Brighton? Obviously, Brighton, a team that we we are currently watching at time of recording, just to peel back the curtain here from a production standpoint. It's 0-0 half time against Wolves in terms of what time we're recording this podcast.
Yeah, I think it'd be a very good game to watch, to be honest. I think Luton, for me, even though they're not, as high as they might want to be in the table, I think they've been quite refreshing in their approach, because they do have that physical side to the game, but most of the time. But I think they've got some nice technical players as well. I mean, Ross Barkley for me has been a revelation in the middle of the park. He's really good to watch. He's rolled back the years. So yeah, I enjoy watching them, and I like they've took this challenge by the scruff of the neck, and especially at home, I think they could get results against anyone really. So I think it'll be a tough game for Brighton, who will wish they had a bit more width about the game, but that pitch will restrict them a bit more, and I think that's when Luton can place their traps and catch them on the break, maybe, because Brighton are still obviously faltering with all their competitions as well. Obviously, the Europe's not back until next month, but you're adding the FA Cup as well now. You've still got to account for that. But yeah, the Brighton form, I don't think they should be too worried about it. I think that it'll click again soon. I think they'll get a run towards the end of the season, and that they had a good result against Spurs recently as well. They blew them away for the majority of the game. So I think they're still a really quality team. It's just the extra workload psychologically as well as physically for them. I think it will be a tight game. I think Luton will try and make it scrappy, because that would suit them a lot more. And I think that Luton will actually come away with a win here. I think it'll be tight, and it'll be a 1-0 late goal winning match.
That would be fantastic for Luton. Yeah, you mentioned the pitch. I think everyone, when you talk about Luton, you have to mention the pitch. Kenilworth is certainly pushing the limits, should I say, of the Premier League regulations when it comes to pitch size and what you can and cannot do from that perspective. But look, I'm okay with it. I have no issues with them doing that. The rules are there. They're playing within the rules. Other teams deal with it. No one complains, when the likes of City or Arsenal have a very wide pitch, because that it suits the way they like to play, and this pitch suits the way Luton try to play, and especially when you're trying to stay in the Premier League, be smart about it. Use all of the things you can to your advantage, and yeah, they've certainly made it a difficult place to come, and it will be difficult for Brighton. I've gotten 1-1 in terms of scoreline predictions here. Obviously, Brighton finally got a clean sheet a couple of weeks back. Could they get another one in this game against Wolves? Time will tell. But I do think this break that you mentioned, not having European football for a little bit, will help them to get back into a good form in the Premier League, and hopefully for their sake, just either, I don't know what their long-term ambitions are for this season, whether they want to put all their eggs in the European basket, or if they still want to try get back into Europe via the Premier League. That I'm not sure of. But at least if they can get a couple of points in now before Europe starts again, just to give themselves a bit of a cushion, would be good. And I think a point at Luton at this point in time is a great point. We've seen teams like Liverpool struggle to get a point at Luton. So yeah, I think a point would be fantastic for them. So I've gone 1-1, and I hope Brighton fans will see that as a positive. And then for Luton, it's just pick up points. Just keep picking up points and see where that leaves you at the end of the season. Let's move on to our next game, Crystal Palace versus Sheffield United. Palace obviously felt the wrath of Arsenal this past weekend, and I felt bad for them, because it's an Arsenal side who, they were top of the log. They've kind of fallen off a bit in terms of the title race, if you can really fall off this season. I feel like teams are going to drop a lot more points than in previous seasons in the title race. So I don't think they're out of the title race, so to speak. But the fans would have been, expecting a reaction at the Emirates, and then Crystal Palace just happened to be the team that was there when Arsenal were at their angriest. So it was rather unfortunate for them. in terms of injuries, I'm looking down the list. Obviously, the big issue for them is trying to get Olise and Eze on the pitch at the same time for at least like 4 or 5 games, where they can really get going, get into a rhythm and start to be, the talisman that they both can be for this team. It must be really frustrating every time one of them comes back, another gets injured. Missing Ayew, who's at AFCON, and I know he's not maybe the poster child for, players that you put first on a team sheet, but I like players like him that can hold the ball up, smart with possession, don't lose it too often. I think that type of stuff helps out a team like Crystal Palace. They come up against Sheffield United, who officially scored the latest goal in Premier League history last time out against West Ham with that penalty. What do you make of this game? Palace need a spark. Obviously, they need a reaction themselves after what happened at the Emirates. And Sheffield United look decent, in my opinion. The results haven't always gone their way, but they've been competitive. They've stayed in games for the most part recently. Obviously, it's a renewal of a manager bounce, bringing back someone that was already there. But I think if Crystal Palace aren't careful, I can see Sheffield United winning this one. I've got 2-1 at the moment to Sheffield United.
That'd be an interesting result. I could see it. I've personally got Palace winning 1-0, but it does depend what sort of Palace turn up. And I think they look like they've got tired minds at the moment. They look like they need some sort of refreshment. And I think if they could have Olise and Eze on at the same time at some point, I think that would give them a bit more of a spark. But they do look a little bit lost at times. They look a bit stodgy, whereas Sheffield United seem to look okay game plan wise, but they can't seem to buy a win at the moment. So I think it's going to be one of those games where it's just going to take a moment of inspiration to settle it. I think Eze could be key to them. I think he can provide that. That's why I've got Palace as a 1-0. I think they'll just edge it, being at home and hopefully mustering some sort of atmosphere. They have a good atmosphere in general at Selhurst, so I think that could sway it as well. But I can't see it being too much of an entertaining game. It's just a game that both of them are looking at that the 3 points would feel like 6 to both of them right now for different reasons. I mean, Palace aren't too far away from the drop zone, but you feel like they're pretty safe every season, no matter what. They seem to be fine. So I think for them, it would just be a rejuvenation of the feeling around the club if they could get a result this weekend. So yeah, I would predict 1-0 for Palace, but it will be a cagey tight game, I think.
If I could ask, do you think the fact that everyone knows it's Roy Hodgson's last season has sort of bled into the malaise sort of with the team as well?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think if I was in that situation supporting Palace and I knew that we're sort of just having to get through this season, they need a bit of fresh ideas, they need some fresh recruitment as well. It feels like almost like a gap year that they've just got to get through. If they're not careful, it can obviously end up bad. But I would say that it has to play its part, because they know that there's a new era on its way. So, yeah, as I say, this will be a big game for them, because I think if they can sort of find some form this end of the season, they can think freshly ahead of themselves then instead of worrying right now. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see in the summer what sort of direction they go as well.
Yeah, certainly one of the clubs to look out for in terms of what they do. Let's move on to what personally I think is going to be game of the week. Obviously not weekend, but game of the week. I know there's some people that might be looking further down on the fixture list with games like Liverpool versus Chelsea. But for me, Newcastle versus Aston Villa. I mean, we saw was it July? There was the 3-3 draw there. We've seen in August, there was obviously the 5-1 Newcastle win. So Villa need to respond. And I'm sure the players will be reminding each other of what happened last time they played them in August and wanting to correct, that wrong from a Villa perspective. And then obviously from a Newcastle perspective, they've looked a shell of themselves in recent weeks. I think the season has finally started to toll on them with having so many games. But to me, I don't feel as sorry for Newcastle as I would someone else, purely because there have been opportunities where they should be rotating and resting players, and Eddie Howe just doesn't do it. So if the manager's not going to rotate players and rest players, why should I feel sympathetic towards them in terms of squad depth? Anthony Gordon is playing every single minute. He's getting the Saka treatment, where whether he's injured or not, he's going to play. And I don't know if that's a recipe that's going to bode well for them. We saw what it did to the form of Kieran Trippier, who I think just mental fatigue just took him out of it from a defensive perspective. And even his influence going forwards has sort of dwindled a bit from their perspective. But yeah, so Newcastle, they need to channel whatever they were on at the beginning of the season if they want to get a result in this one. And then from a Villa perspective, obviously the 0-0 draw with Everton, in my opinion, frustrating but not worrying. There's some times where you draw a game and you're like, okay, the team's heading in a scary situation. I thought they were creating chances. It was just one of those where, okay, the ball just didn't go in the back of the net. On another day, they probably would have scored 2 or 3 goals. So it didn't worry me, that performance. And they will be looking at this Newcastle team, seeing their form and saying, guys, that this is a game we have to go and bury them.
Yeah, it is. I think, you look at Newcastle's form, you look at their mental fatigue, their injury list, and the fact that we've got home advantage. This game often seems to swing on who's at home, to be honest. They're usually really good games, even in pre-season, as you say. That was a thrilling game to watch. I mean, I think it was last season, I think we won 2-0 at home against them. It might have been in the season before, but it usually is the home team that wins. And you think about when we were managerless, waiting for Emery to come in, we lost 4-0 to them at the start of last season, and then we beat them 3-0 in April. Then there's the 3-3 in pre-season, and then Newcastle obviously smashed us 5-1 first game of the season. So it does tend to sway on the atmosphere. There's a little bit of I wouldn't say a rivalry between the clubs. There's something between us, and I always say I think that we're quite a similar fan base. We're passionate and we're opinionated and we're naive. So I think that's sort of what rubs against each other. But in terms of on the pitch, Newcastle, they also look a bit lost as well as tired at times. I think they've just had to get through so many games and so many big games this season where they've just fell short as well, that I think it has taken its toll. Whereas I agree with you, in our case, last time out against Everton, I thought we had some good chances and it was just fine margins. That the disallowed goal was close. If it had been allowed, you'd probably said, again, fine margins, but you'd allow it. So I wasn't worried watching it. I think there's a lot of feeling around the club at the moment that we're a little bit stodgier than what we were. But I think that's because the first half of the season we were creating a plethora of chances every game because teams were a bit naive against us. But now they've learnt their lesson. They know how to trap us and try and isolate players so they can't really create the same opportunities. But we're working it out slowly and still creating some decent opportunities. So I don't worry for us. I think that this will be a game that could be decided on by the physicality and who can win more of the 50-50s and things like that. I have us down for a 2-1 win, which I think would be really big for us in terms of keeping up that Champions League contention, because it's not just another win, but it's against one of those teams that you want to lay down a bit of a marker and prove yourselves again. So there'll be a good atmosphere around it, 100%. I have no doubt about that, and I think that'll carry us through the game. An early goal, and then just try and keep on top of them. So yeah, I'd go for 2-1 to Villa.
2-1 to Villa. I've gone 3-1 to Villa, and it might be one of those games where the scoreline maybe ends up being a bit harsher than how the game turned out. But in my opinion, I don't know if Newcastle can keep up for 90 minutes, quite frankly. I look at also the impact of the players coming off the bench for Villa at the moment. Even Zainolo coming off the bench looks sensational. Like, could you imagine if he comes on the right-hand side, whoever it is, Dan Burn or whatever, has been chasing Bailey for 70 minutes, and then on comes this guy. I just don't see Newcastle having the stamina to keep up. It might be a situation where it's 2-1 for a really long time, and then Newcastle try and go and get that draw, and then they just get picked off, and it makes it 3-1. But yeah, certainly my game of the weekend. I'm assuming it's going to be yours as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. I always look forward to us playing Newcastle, as well as have a slight bit of nerves, because it's just one of those games that I think it can be really open, and you can feel a bit tense at times. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching it.
And it's you mentioned that sort of rivalry that starting to build a bit there and brewing. I think also the fact that both teams did so well last season as well, does add fuel to a game like this. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. But let's take a short break, and then we will discuss the FA Cup and Carabao Cup. We'll be right back with our guest after this short break.
Tired of ads crashing your comedy podcast party? Good news. Ad-free listening on Amazon Music is included with your Prime membership. Just head to amazon.com/ad-free comedy to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads. Enjoy thousands of Acast shows ad-free for Prime subscribers. Some shows may have ads.
At Discount Tire, we know your time is valuable. Get 30% shorter average wait time when you buy and book online. Did you know Discount Tire now sells wiper blades? Check out our current deals at discounttire.com or stop in and talk to an associate today. Discount Tire.
Let's get you taken care of.
All right, we are back. We mentioned earlier in the podcast that obviously this weekend coming up, there are a lot of teams that will be taking part in the FA Cup. Some of them, it's going to be a break, but then also there are teams taking part in the Carabao Cup as well. And obviously you have teams like Liverpool that are doing both. We will see how that shapes up for them when, we've talking about the amount of games that have had effect on certain teams. We'll see when we get to Liverpool. But in terms of the FA Cup and Carabao Cup, first and foremost, what are your thoughts on the UK or England having two domestic cup competitions?
I like it. I'd love to go deep into both competitions personally. I think silverware is becoming, in terms of the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup, I think is becoming less important in a lot of teams' eyes compared to qualifying for Champions League, because the financial benefits long term of Champions League. So I understand it, but when you grow up and you have those big days, the semi-finals and finals of cups, they're special days, and I think it doesn't matter whether it's the Carabao or the FA Cup for me. I remember the 2009 or 10 League Cup final that we played against United, and I still to this day feel robbed that Vidic didn't get sent off, and it could have been a very different game from that. And then the FA Cup final 2015 that we got smashed 4-0 by Arsenal, which was a day that I was just looking forward to for a long time, and then obviously it ends on a sour note. But it's, for me, that's what football is about, is for those days where it's not just about the result, but the people that travel down to Wembley, the fans that have the day out together. I think that's such a massive part of it. And if you win in the end, then that's the cherry on top for me. And I think that I would like teams to take it a bit more seriously as well. But I know that the fixture load these days it is quite high, but at the same time, teams are building bigger squads. So if you're smart enough around it, and you can involve your academy, if you take your academy recruitment seriously as well, which Villa tend to do that nowadays. We do put a lot of money into the academy and try and focus on bringing those through, or even using them to sell them on and bring in other talents. So you're still thinking about that squad planning. So I think if teams thought about it more, that could challenge in more than one competition, I think that'd be great. I think football, any sort of game should be big to a team for me. And then when you think about the FA Cup for the lower teams, the FA Cup's massive for them. And, I think a lot of Prem teams just treat it as a bit of a throwaway sometimes, that, use fringe players or youth players only. And it's just, I understand it from one point of view, but I do miss that sort of vigour for the cup. So it's quite sad seeing it sometimes just be thrown away a bit for the Champions League places, etc., or just finishing, strongly in the Premier League. It's quite sad to see sometimes, but I would like to see, especially the FA Cup being so prestigious. For me, that's something that I'd love to see us win. Like this season, if we could win the FA Cup, I'd take that over the Europa Conference League personally, because of the prestige around it. And it's just that cup that I've always wanted to win. So, yeah, I love the cups personally.
Yeah, and I think for me as well, the solution, because you've mentioned the amount of football that clubs are playing at the moment, but also the money that is involved. It's now such a big factor, especially with the transfer fees that get thrown around now. You have to have a lot of revenue coming in. So that's probably why these cups don't get prioritized as much. I think the only solution is, okay, FA Cup takes one of the Champions League spots.
Yeah.
Something like that. Because, England now have a fifth, based on, the coefficients, and if all things work out well, England will have a fifth spot in the league in terms of Champions League. Move that fifth spot, fifth English spot, move it to the FA Cup. The team that wins the FA Cup gets that fifth spot. If not, okay, it goes back to the team that's fifth in the league or whatever. If say a Man City goes and wins every trophy like they did last year, there can be other ways to decide who gets it. But start off by giving that FA Cup a Champions League spot. You'll start to see a lot more teams play a lot more, of their starters in those type of games. And if they don't, that's fine. Like that's on you. You know what I mean? If you have to make that decision, and you have to manage your squad throughout a season and decide which trophies to go for. I think for me, the one thing I always valued with Jose Mourinho is every time he came into a club, the first thing he would do is target the Carabao Cup, because it's not a lot of games. You can get a trophy in by Feb, and that just takes the weight and the pressure off of him of winning a trophy with that team. And also it instills in your squad, this desire to win trophies. This is the standard. We win trophies. And it seemed to work really well for him. It was going to work against, for Tottenham, and then they fired him the week before the final. So even, later years, Jose Mourinho, who's maybe not as revered or feared in the league as he used to be, certainly when he came into Chelsea, even this version of Jose Mourinho was still doing well in the cups. So, I mean, it's such a smart play from that perspective. Me personally, being a Liverpool fan, it's first world problems, and I own that. And I know it's a personal feeling. For me, I want the league. And I know Jurgen Klopp. Jurgen Klopp wants everything. And Jurgen Klopp will play starters. He will play a Virgil van Dijk in the third round of the Carabao Cup because he wants to win that game. From my perspective, I'm thinking those minutes that he's playing in this cup, we're gonna feel them second half of the season, and it's gonna cost us. We saw it the season where we were on the last day of every single competition that we entered. So Carabao Cup final, FA Cup final, Premier League was decided on the last day, Champions League final. We won the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup. But come the end of the season, when it came to the Premier League and the Champions League, our players were finished. Salah, etc., Van Dijk, they didn't have much to give come the end of the season. And from my perspective, it's going with where your squad or your team is. For Liverpool, I think now is a chance to go win a league title, because City aren't the City we've seen in the past. Obviously, De Bruyne is back now, so we don't know. But it seems like an opportunity to go and win a league title. So from my perspective, I wouldn't put as much weight on, the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup, because I want to go put all my eggs in the league. And if we end up losing it, fair enough. But I want to give myself the best chance to go win the league. But not too long ago, Liverpool went years without winning a trophy. Back then, I wasn't saying that, because I was like, I want a trophy. FA Cup, yes, go for it. But I think because of where we are, and I say it's a first world problem. I fully appreciate that. I want the league. And that's why I don't put as much weight in the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup, because I don't want it to eat into our minutes. I don't know if that's too higher up, or looking down on the Cups. I hope I'm not disrespecting them. As I said, I think they should give it a Champions League position, to try and boost the Cup, because I do want it to be competitive. I just think from my personal perspective, with where Liverpool are at the moment, I really want a league title again.
No, I think that's fair. As you say, I think where your team is at right now can play a part in that thinking. You know, for us, we know that I think right now we should be targeting the top 5 with how we've started this season and gone on. But we're so short of silverware in recent times that, you know, an FA Cup would feel like top 5 to me. It'd feel better. So, but I think if you was to win an FA Cup and then a Carabao Cup, the Europa Conference League, I think winning is sort of normalised then, and you want the bigger trophies. And, you know, I suppose for Liverpool, only having the one Premier League title, but you've got the quality really to push another one now, especially with Klopp still around. You'd want to push that as much as you can, because obviously nothing lasts forever, and City will feel that as well when Guardiola goes, I feel. So I can understand that thinking. But yeah, if there was to make the FA Cup 5th spot, pretty much, then I think that would make a lot of teams think twice about how they approach it, and it would make it a really interesting cup competition then, and it would then play into the league as well. You know, if teams start to reprioritise the FA Cup, you see different results in the Premier League as well then. So I think it'd be really interesting to see how the competitions affect each other then as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm interested to hear what some of the fans have to say on our opinions on that. But let's move on to the rest of the fixtures. Speaking of Manchester City, they will be entertaining Burnley. Look, I think Burnley, I don't think it's disrespectful to say they're going to be trying to keep the scoreline as respectable as possible. To me, it's the toughest game on paper in the league is Man City at the Etihad. Every single time, I just think with what they've done in recent history, that is the toughest fixture in the league. Obviously, Burnley, I think, have had some okay performances recently. They just haven't quite resulted in wins. Some of them, maybe some refereeing decisions that they will be questioning. Certainly, it seems every time I'm putting on a Burnley game, there is some sort of controversy in games involving them. So they've been on the wrong end of a couple of decisions. But do you think Company could come in against his old club and pull off something special here?
In all honesty, no. I think that they're a side that I quite like to watch. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like they might be a little bit naive in how they approach playing out from the back, but I understand that's a philosophy thing. And if you can bed that in as you're still trying to build your squad for the future, then, you know, it works out long term. But you've also got to think about what your long term is going to be, whether that'll be in the Premier League or in the Championship. So at some point you have to think about pragmatism as well, as you want the results. And this game coming just feels like it's only going to be one result, and I'd expect City to put 3 or 4 past them. I have got 4-0. If De Bruyne gets it, you know, plenty of minutes as well, I think I can only see being at least 3 goals. And Foden is purring, and Haaland return on the horizon. I feel like this is where City start to do their thing. They start to motor, they start to hit a groove, and they will start pushing teams to the side. And it's going to make it a really interesting run in at the top of the league, because Liverpool, even with the players they're missing right now as well, they look really good to me. I've seen quite a few questions about whether what they're doing is sustainable, but for me, the quality they've got makes it sustainable. But back onto City against Burnley, I think this is going to be just a repeat of what we usually see from City. So if I was Company, I would be looking to try and keep that score down. You know, you do want to go into games thinking you can get something, but you've also got to be a bit realistic in how you approach it. So goal difference can be massive towards the end of the season. If I was them, I'd be thinking about defensive solidity first against City.
Yeah, and you mentioned sort of the style of football he's trying to bed in there. this is the wrong team to play because I think, obviously Vincent Kompany coming out of the school of this City style football, he's going to want to play with the ball on the ground, and it's not going to work against a team that lives and breathes it every single day at such a high level as City do. I've also got 4-0 written down here. I just don't think it's going to bode well for Burnley. I'm not expecting them to sit back and sort of, make it difficult for City and try and win it with set pieces. I'm expecting them to try and be brave, play with the ball, and they're going to get caught out. So yeah, I've gone 4-0 as well on that one. Let's move on to Tottenham versus Brentford. You mentioned the return of Ivan Toney a bit earlier in the podcast. The cheek of him moving that ball to take that free kick. Look, I applaud him, and I do, because how many times do we see the wall scratch out that white marker that refs put down and sort of start creeping forward and walking forward, and by the time the free kick's taken, they've basically walked at least 2 yards forward. So if they're going to do that and you can get away with doing this, I don't know how much often he can get away with doing that now going forward, but it worked out in this game. What do you make of Tottenham versus Brentford? Low key, another game that could be quite spicy.
Yeah, I think it could be. I think Brentford are having a few games recently where there's a bit of heat to it, which might suit them. I think they will be looking forward to another game with Toney back. He just gives them another dimension. He can terrorise any sort of defence, not with just his physicality. I think he doesn't look short of fitness in the sense of he played 100 minutes the other night, and I don't think he looked like he was flagging until quite late on. He's just a really solid player, but Spurs at home, I think some of their returning players are building them back up again, and they're still so good to watch. And I think when Maddison returns for them, I think that could really decide what the end of their season looks like. I like them buying is Dragusin. I think he looks like he'll be quite a solid centre back, tough to get past, and that will help considering Van der Ven was out for some time. You don't know whether that he'll become a bit more susceptible to more injuries now. So it depends on that front. But in terms of squad rotation as well, it's only going to benefit them. It was a big win for Brentford the other day. It was cheeky from Toney, but football's about finding those margins, and he did. If it was me, I'd be looking more at the goalkeeper positioning, to be honest. His own player was telling him that, and he left Toney a massive window of opportunity there to aim at. So that's what I'm looking at more personally. But yeah, this game, I've got Spurs 3-1. I think Toney will score again, but I think Spurs will dominate most of the game. And yeah, they do look in pretty decent form, 3 wins out of the last 5. I can only see one result, and it would be another really solid win for them.
Yeah, and it's at home as well for Spurs. They've got a decent atmosphere. So I spend way more time than I would care to admit at Tottenham games, obviously with my better half being a Spurs fan. But I think Spurs are starting to get into that groove of consistency, starting to get results, their performances obviously playing well. Richarlison's starting to play well, which has been very beneficial for them. A few players starting to come back from injury. I think that also plays a big part from a psychological standpoint for the squad. If we know, okay, we've got a James Maddison, he's almost back, let's keep this momentum going. I think it seems like an upwards trajectory for Tottenham at the moment. I've gone 2-1 in this game. I think Brentford will make it difficult for them. Ivan Toney, obviously it will be interesting to see how he plays against the Spurs defenders. Not a player that's going to necessarily run in behind Van der Ven. So I don't think that's going to be too big a worry for Spurs from that perspective. But his physicality, the runners in and around supporting Ivan Toney, that's going to be quite interesting for me, because Spurs don't usually face that kind of problem. It's more usually our team's going to try and get in behind us. What about when they come and be a bit more physical up front? I want to see how Spurs handle that. But in terms of overall performance, I think Spurs, they create a bucket load of chances. They're going to have enough to go and win this one 2-1. Let's move on to Liverpool versus Chelsea. From my perspective, this game tends to be cagey way more than it needs to be. I don't know why, irrespective of what form these two teams come into these games, it always ends up being like a 1-1 or 1-0, 0-0 low scoring game. So I'm going to go 1-0 to Liverpool because of how cagey these games constantly seem to be. Obviously, Liverpool have Carabao Cup, FA Cup, then the Chelsea game, then they've got an Arsenal game coming up as well. Is that going to be something that factors into this Chelsea game? How much can they give in this game? How much do they have in their legs? We know they're missing a lot of players, the Salahs, the Trents, Szoboszlai is not there. Obviously, then you got the long-term injuries of, Thiago, etc. It's going to ask a lot of Liverpool, but I have a feeling that at home, you just back Liverpool. They've been so dominant when they've played at Anfield, and considering these games are always cagey, I'm going to give them the edge with a 1-0 Liverpool. And I was tempted to go 1-1, but Liverpool have been quite good defensively of late. And I'll just end with this. I'm still not as confident in this Liverpool team. I don't know if it's because, obviously recent history, you have to get 90 points just to get into the conversation of a league title. And I don't see, unless City do what City do, I don't see a team getting to 90 this season. So maybe that's why I'm not as confident in this team, but they seem to be efficient and effective. Somehow they just get results on the board.
Yeah, for me, you're the team to beat. There's just something that's so, I don't even know how to explain it. You have such a good system, I think, around it, but the players, they're fit perfectly for me. Even without Salah right now, and obviously without Trent, you just see, as you say, seems so efficient and so energetic. And I think, especially with Anfield behind you, you can just be electric. And I've got you down for 2-0 against Chelsea. Chelsea's form obviously has picked up a bit recently, but I don't know. There's still something that doesn't feel quite right about them 100%. I think they're looking a bit more settled within the squad. But I think when it comes to big games, I still think that they're going to struggle to get anything out of them. And then it can knock them back again in the other games. So I just see that you'll score early and score late, I think. And I think Chelsea will have a couple of opportunities when they're getting behind. But, your defence looks solid. Van Dijk just looks top quality. And when you've got someone like Alisson in goal as well. I think that you're going to be the team to beat for the title for me. If I was Chelsea, I'd be looking still to push second half of this season and look for European places. But especially with the squad that they've got, that they should have the strength to manage that. But the quality that's around them team wise is also going to make it tough. I think that it will be quite a cagey game at times, but I think you just create such good chances and you can be so clinical. I personally love Darwin Núñez. I have since last season as well. That he's chaotic, but there's just something so interesting about his game. He can get in behind. I think his link-up play has improved and still can improve a bit more. And I think his finish for the first goal in the last match was quality. Really calm and composed. And I think if you can do that a lot more, I think you'd have a really, really top quality forward on your hands. So I think it'll be an interesting game.
Yeah, definitely. And with Darwin, I guess now with Salah and Trent not there, Szoboszlai not there, he's kind of the guy that has to lead things from an attacking standpoint, which probably feels more familiar to him with what he's had in the past in previous clubs where he's the focal point, the main man. Certainly worked out in the last game. Let's move on to West Ham versus Bournemouth. Obviously, West Ham probably feeling quite hard done by, goalkeeper getting injured and conceding that penalty late on. I think a draw probably was a fair result against Sheffield United because I thought Sheffield United kept them honest. West Ham obviously missing quite a few players. I'm interested in how this game is going to work out because Bournemouth play with this new sort of high pressing style system. West Ham like to invite teams onto them and play on the counter attack, but at the moment that counter attack doesn't have the depth that it's had in recent weeks. Obviously either injuries or AFCON or, people away. I don't know if that system's going to work against Bournemouth when West Ham don't have all their assets to utilize. Obviously, I think Danny Ings did quite okay in that 10 role, but again, Bowen, I think, is playing injured at the moment. I've gone with a 2-0 Bournemouth win. I think they're going to cause it, whether it's an upset or not, but I think Bournemouth win this one.
I've gone for a 2-2, another 2-2 for them. I think that Bournemouth will be hard for them to stop, but I think with how Bournemouth can press and push up high, I think West Ham might catch them on the break. This is the thing for me with West Ham, is that they're not too consistent, and I think it is because of their approach of how they want to soak up more of the game and counter quite a lot. If they're not on the game, then they're not going to get the result that often. So it does depend on how clinical they are, and they are missing sort of some of those players that can make the difference for them. It could be perfect for Bournemouth. This really, I think that could pin West Ham back and cause them a lot of problems. But at the same time, it could work the other way for West Ham. So that's why I went for a draw, a higher scoring draw. I think it could be quite open at times, so it'll be interesting to watch. I think West Ham fans will feel a bit restless again if they don't get a win. And I think Bournemouth, if they were to get a point on the road, they would take it. But I think that they should be aiming for 3 points still. I think that they are really, really fun to watch, and they have got a really interesting squad of players as well, which they're another team for me that I'm going to be watching in the summer to see what they do, because I quite like their recruitment, and I think that they could push for something a little bit higher next season as well. But yeah, I've gone 2-2, a score draw.
Score draw, and they certainly have an interesting coach. I think, as you say, there is something there that they could really build on, and we'll see whether they can. Let's move on to the last game of that week. It's Wolves versus Man United. Obviously, Wolves were one of the form teams heading into this previous game week. They're currently still 0-0 at time of recording, about 82 minutes into the game against Brighton. But they come up against a Man United side who, inconsistent throughout the season, struggling going forward. I can't figure out what Man United are in terms of style of play. Even patterns of play going forward just doesn't seem to be there. We saw a little bit, in my opinion, against Tottenham, where as soon as Bruno got the ball, he was just pinging it wide as quickly as possible. But that's because Tottenham play with a high line and with fullbacks that bomb forward. That's not going to be the case against Wolves. So again, I don't know if that pattern of play can work in this game. So with that being said, I think it's going to be quite a frustrating game for Man United, because Wolves have been very solid under Gary O'Neill. I think obviously missing some players. Aiton Nuri, I think, is at AFCON. Traore is at AFCON. Hee-Chan Wang is at the Asia Cup as well. He's been in good form. But Pedro Neto's coming back, which is good for them. I was leaning 1-0 Wolves. Part of me earlier today was going to go 1-1 as well. I don't trust United's attack. I'm going to stick to my guns. 1-0 to Wolves. A frustrating day for Man United. Probably heaps more pressure on Ten Hag. I don't know what this team... Can you figure them out?
No. I don't really like watching them, to be honest, because if it was me watching them as a fan, I'd be really frustrated with being confused what we watch each week. I think, as you say, attacking patterns, but also the pressing doesn't seem to match up all the time. I think he often has to switch their pressing plan. And I think coming up against Wolves, who have a good home record, that they're in form, and they enjoy playing against these big sides, the crowd are up for it, and so are the team. I think they've got the perfect squad to play these top sides, the big six. You look at the the players that are really good at carrying the ball, really physical and got pace about them. I think that this squad is set up to get results against teams like this, and especially if United aren't on the game defensively or in the opposition box, then I think it will be a win for Wolves. It would be a big win for United if they could get it, because their form's not been great as usual recently. So I think that they should be looking at winning this. And with Højlund in the goals a bit more now, I think maybe he could get on the score sheet again. That's why I've gone 2-1. But yeah, I can only see Wolves winning this for the aligning factors of their form being at home, and I think that their game plan against these teams often comes off. So yeah, I agree. Another frustrating day for United fans, I think.
Yeah, well, that is going to do it for another episode of A Tad Predictable. James, do you have anything you want to plug, put over, promote before we wrap up?
Just the podcast again, the IVFC Faithful podcast. We're on Spotify, we're on YouTube. You'll find us on Twitter. You can find the tag in the description. Me and my co-host Dan, we often do weekly episodes. Depends on the schedule and what we're doing. But yeah, we do try and get weekly episodes out. So if you can go and follow that, if you're a Villa fan or even if you're not.
Definitely, guys, go check that out. From my end, go ahead and check out all the content on EPL Index website. Their match previews, post-match review, player performances, and obviously during a transfer window, all of the transfer news that you guys could wish for. Of course, there's the daily podcast show. That's the Two-Footed podcast with Dave Hendrick, where he discusses the hottest topics in football. Finally, also check out the flagship show that runs weekly. That's the EPL Roundtable, where Kev De Vries sits down with panelists from respective EPL teams. They do the reviewing. We do the previewing on A Tad Predictable. They do the reviewing after the game weeks. That usually comes out on the weekends. This show, obviously, go and follow the Twitter page at A Tad Predictable. Go follow at EPL Index on Twitter as well. Subscribe to EPL Index podcast channel on your podcast providers. Give us 5 stars, write positive comments. That stuff really does help us out. Go and write positive comments for James's podcast as well. I'm sure he'll appreciate that very much. I've been Tadio Chinikera. You can find me on my Twitter handle at Tad Predicts. A huge thank you to Obi Semenya. He's at John Empire SA, and Jodie McKennis. She's at Spursy141 for our guest intros. Our producer behind the glass, Mr. Guy Drinkle. He's at Guy Drinkle on Twitter. He's been James. He's at the Holt 1874. That at the HOLTE 1874 on Twitter. And remember, Chisingapere, Chinoshura.
And still, Salah, sensational! Son had a go and scored a beauty!
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans!
De Bruyne! And it is Wood-Prowse!
Martinelli, gorgeous!
Still Gallagher! Oh, he's done it again! And City have won the Premier League!
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Tired of ads crashing your comedy podcast party? Good news. Ad-free listening on Amazon Music is included with your Prime membership. Just head to amazon.com/ad-free comedy to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads. Enjoy thousands of Acast shows ad-free for Prime subscribers. Some shows may have ads.